Hi, okay, so my lesson plan covers the activity 11.7, How Much Between. It is meant for a second grade classroom and it should take about 45 minutes to teach the lesson. And so let's go ahead and take a look at that activity. So that's activity 11.7. Provide students with a blank hundreds charts. Give the students two numbers. Their task is to determine how much from one number to the next. And that corresponds with the standard. Fluently, efficiently, accurately, and flexibly add and subtract within 100 using strategies based on place value, properties of operations, and or the relationship between addition and subtraction. And that is 2 in BT.5. And so I would incorporate writing, and that standard for second graders would be W.2.11, demonstrate command of the conventions of standard English capitalization, punctuation, and spelling when writing. And I'll show you later on how I'm going to tie the two together. And I actually created a rubric that will help students know what exactly is expected of them when covering both standards. So the objective following Bloom's taxonomy here would be given a set of addition and subtraction problems with missing add-ins, sums, minuends, subtraheds, and differences. Students will refer to a hundreds chart to identify the missing numbers, scoring 7 out of 10 for mastery. And to discuss that a little bit further, I have some assessments listed here. So as an interest assessment, we would just have an opening discussion about when students use addition and subtraction in their daily lives, and then a pre-assessment so that I can see where my class is at before actually teaching anything. I have created a little Kahoot quiz that we would do. This is all meant to be taught online to students through Zoom and Google Classroom and Flipgrid and YouTube and Kahoot. And so everything that I am going over today can be done through those apps with students virtually. The formative assessment would be the one that covers that objective above. Hundreds chart with 10 problems activity. This would not be for a grade. It would be for me to see what areas the students need more work in. The summative assessment, however, and I wrote a separate objective for this one because this covers the standard, the writing standard. So given that students have completed the hundreds chart activities and listened to an example book, students will write a short story using at least one addition and one subtraction problem to guide the plot, illustrating pictures throughout, scoring 19 out of 25 on the rubric for mastery, so 75% or higher. I know I'm skipping a lot, but I'd like to spend most of my time discussing how I'll actually teach the lesson. Um, Everything is detailed in this written document here that goes along with my lessons, though. Some misconceptions that students may have is students are not familiar with the commutative property, and will take the time to count up 5 plus 15 by starting at 5 and counting 15 more rather than switching the order. Um, of course, I would counter that by teaching them this property and giving several examples. Another misconception, students may wonder about adding numbers whose sums are greater than 100 and how they can do that when they only have a 100s chart. Um, Again, I would say that today we're just working with problems whose sums are less than 100, but as soon as you master numbers like those, it will be a lot easier for you to work with greater numbers. And I can give some examples like that as well. But just tell the students today we're just focusing on numbers that are less than 100. And then last one, students may not know how to write a story with a beginning, middle, and end. And that's for the writing standard again. And for that, I have an example book that I'm going to read, and I will discuss the rubric with the students before just like letting them loose and expecting them to get done their summative assessment. So I will go over everything that is required before asking them to complete or turn anything in. Here we go. Just the property I would be discussing, the mathematical law that states that order does not matter in addition and multiplication problems. And again, I'd really have to, or I'm sorry, that order does not matter in addition and multiplication problems. And again, I would have to stress that that's just in addition and multiplication and not in subtraction or division. So this is since students would be working from home and they don't have a classroom, they don't have a teacher to provide them with materials. I don't want to ask a lot of them. So really all students are going to need is their laptop with a webcam and then access to the internet so they can get on Google Drive, Flipgrid, and Zoom. And then also they're just going to need 3 blank pieces of paper. They can use whatever kind of paper they have at home. I'm going to just be using white printer paper, but notebook paper is okay too. And then, of course, a pencil and something to color with. So, not too much there from them. As for the classroom management, if this were a regular classroom, I would use the Give 'em 5. I'd say clap once if you can hear me. I'd remind the students of the voice level scale in our classroom. But since this is online, I will have the ability to mute students' mics. I will use Google Classroom as a platform to have discussions. Um, and I will be doing yoga and Zumba as brain breaks so that the students do not need any more materials. Again, I'm trying to eliminate that um, factor there. And then I would have students who are behind share their work with me while doing their work so that I can monitor that it's actually being done. So, like in class, if I knew a certain group of students or a particular student uh, was having trouble completing things, I could monitor them specifically or have them come work by me or have a pair work with them. But online, it's a lot harder to know what kids are doing at home and to get them to be focused and turning in their assignments. But with Google Drive, I can share documents with the students and see what they're working on as they're working on it. So I would do that. Okay, so just to get the actual lesson started, I would say students, today we're going to be working with addition and subtraction using a 100s chart. This is a great tool. We can find lots of patterns by using this chart, and it will help us develop skills for the multiplication and division that you'll learn in 3rd grade. So just kind of trying to set them up, get them excited, and then I would finish up the engagement by saying that today you'll even be getting to do some writing and illustration in math class. So I would just start our class for the day by having a discussion with students, and the questions that I would ask would say, when have you used or when can you use addition and subtraction in your daily lives? And this would be in the Zoom conversation. So I would have students, I would have all of their mics muted, but there's a discussion board. So I'd have them send an exclamation point if they had an answer, then I'd unmute them. I do this with about 5 students. We'd talk about their answers and why they said them. Then I move on to the next one. How has knowing how to add and subtract made life easier? And are these skills that everyone needs? And again, I do about 5 students by having them send an exclamation point if they have an answer. It's kind of like raising your hands the Zoom way. Then I would go ahead and move on to a little Kahoot quiz. I'd send the kiddos the link, they'd get on there, they would do this for me. I just have 5 questions here. 14 plus 6, 18 minus 5, 20 plus 40, 33 plus 55, and 63 minus 41. I like Kahoot because I can see it's like clickers. I can see the responses right away. I can see how students are doing. After each question is answered by the students, I would discuss what the right answers are. So moving on, then I would jump into actually teaching with 100s chart. So I would open a Google document that has a 100s chart already created, and I would give some examples. So I might say 6 plus 7, I'd start at 6. Then I'd use the highlight function, which I would encourage students to do. If they actually had this printed out, I would print it out and laminate it so that they could use dry erase markers and mark and help themselves be able to count up. Since they don't, we can use that highlight function and it works just as well. So 6 plus 7, I would count up 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh my goodness, my computer, when I'm doing this record function, it doesn't let me drag like I normally can. And I'm sorry, this is a bad example, but in Zoom it will let me. I'm using this Screencastify, and whenever I'm using its pointer, it doesn't let me do all the functions that I normally have the ability to use. But anyway, I would just count up 7 and land on 13, and then I would do several examples. I do some subtraction problems. I would discuss the commutative property and how 6 plus 7 was pretty easy to count up, but what if I had 6 plus 39? And then I would show students how starting at 39 and counting up 6 is the same and faster than doing it in the order that it was written. Um, and then I would give some examples as to how this does not work with subtraction. I would do like 23 minus 11 is 12, but 23 plus 11 is 34. Or I'm sorry, 23 minus 11 is 12, but 11 minus 23 is negative, and students don't even know how to do that yet. So, anyway, moving on from that, I would give the students some practice problems. I would say you can reference my chart on your screen. I'd give them just a few and they could type their answers in the discussion board once they have them. And then after giving them a little bit of work time, I'd go over the answers with them. Um, then I would ask the students to go into our Google Classroom, open the folder that I have made specifically for this class period, and then create their own 100s charts. And so by doing that, and I would demonstrate this, they'd go to Insert, they would go to Table, and then they would make a 10 by 10 box, just like that. And then I'd ask them to fill them in, reminding them that all the 10s are over here, that every row should have 10 numbers in it, and that every column should have the same digit in the ones position. And so then I would give them some work time to fill out their hundreds charts, and then I'd have them send an exclamation point when they were done. Send that in the Zoom chat so I know if everyone is still working or not. And then I would go ahead and give them our 10 problems that would be for our formative assessment. And I would type them and I would encourage them to type them as well in case for some reason I move on too quickly. They can at least have the problems there to come back to if they finish another one quick. So 10 plus 5 equals, and I'd have all their mics muted. They would be doing this on their own document. When they're done with all 10 problems, they would turn in the document. They would share it with me. So I would read the problem. I would say 10 plus 5 equals. I give them some time to work. After a couple minutes, I'd move on to the next one. So then this one's a little bit different. I have 9 plus what equals 21. And they'd be encouraged here to use their 100s charts. Oh, and I forgot to mention that I would want to teach them how great of a tool the number 10 can be. So if they have 6 plus 11, they can just skip down one row and then count over 1. Or if they have 17 minus 9, or 17. Let's do 17 plus 9 because I give 2 addition problems here. 17 plus 9, they could add 10 and then subtract 1 for the 9. So we'd go over how they can use tens. Or if there was like 41, 8 plus 41, they could count down, 4 tens and over 1, so on and so forth. But anyway, so this one would only be addition problems because the standard calls for addition and subtraction problems. So I would have 10 examples that look like these. These are just a few of them. Here's 4 just listed here as an example for means of this presentation. But anyway, so I would have the students do all 10 problems. I would have them share their final results with me, and that would be the end. And then moving on, we do a little bit of brain break. I have Zumba that I would pull up on my screen, share with them. I would get up and do this with them. It's just a little Zumba dance for kids. It's pretty fun. The teacher should do this with them though. And then after doing that, I would go ahead and read this book here. It's called Spaghetti and Meatballs for All, a Mathematical Story. And so as the teacher, you would hit play and then you would mute it. And so this way you could share it with students online without having to buy anything. And then you could go ahead and read the narrative aloud. So students can still see it. You can read it. You're not having anybody on YouTube read it aloud for you. Me as the teacher, I would be reading it. Anyway, so this is just to introduce them to our summative assessment. And so I have a rubric. I always like to go over rubrics with my students first. They would be tested in a few different categories here. Spelling and grammar, length and illustration requirement, math, creativity, and flow. So I would say, I would share this with them. I'd say to get 4s, this is what I'm expecting of you. So spelling and grammar, to get a 4, you didn't make any spelling errors, any grammar errors. The length and illustration requirement, so you are, the book would be 8 pages long. The students need to have written dialogue on 8 out of 8 pages, but I'm only requiring them to have illustrations on 4 out of 8. As for the math, the students included at least 1 correct addition and 1 correct subtraction problem. Creativity, ideas were unique and the reader was kept intrigued. That one's pretty self-explanatory there. And then the flow, there was sequence, there was initial thought, there was an explanation, there was a conclusion. Anyway, so that would be what is required of them. And then I would want to go ahead and talk about this a little bit more with students. I would say, remember how we just read that book, Spaghetti and Meatballs, and there was addition and subtraction? Well, you have to create your own story, and you're going to come up with your own math problems and have those guide your narrative. And so to do that, I need everybody to get 3 pieces of paper, stack them on top of one another, then fold them in half hamburger style. Like that. And then with the pages so that they can open. So the open pages on the right side and the binding on the left side, you're going to create staples. And so again, I didn't want to have too many materials that students might not have, so we're just going to do homemade staples. So that would be, you can either tear or you can use scissors, but you just tear 2 little slits and then you fold it down and back like that. Kind of, there you go. And that's like a homemade staple. And you would do 2 or 3 of those along the spine. And so the students would be required to, sorry, this keeps popping up. The students would be required to have a cover, and then they'd have their 8 pages of content. Um, and that's pretty much it. Then I would wrap it up by, and I don't like to give students homework, but this would be the end of our math period. So they would need to get this book part done on their own time. And they would have a full week to finish it and turn it into me and Flipgrid. They would need to make a video presentation of themselves reading it and showing the pictures and putting that in our Flipgrid discussion. So everything is really technology oriented in this lesson here. And then to conclude, I would just thank the students for their attention. Tell them I hope they learned something. We'll get lots more practice. I'm going to look over their 100 strat activities. If we need more practice, we will definitely do so. But if they have already mastered it, then we'll move on. I won't bore them any longer. So then I'll tell them I look forward to reading their stories. But in the meantime, while they're at home and they're outside of school, have discussions with their adults about how their parents use math in their daily lives. And then to bring those ideas to me in class the next day and we talk about them together. And that pretty much wraps it up. That would be the whole lesson. Um, Again, in my actual lesson plan, I have detailed description of how it can be modified for students with exceptionalities. But that about concludes it. Thank you.